A top trade official recently traveling to Mexico for talks expected to keep tariffs at the center of North American trade policy, even as American consumers face an average $700 increase in costs this year from U.S. tariffs. Now, that cost estimate comes from the Tax Foundation, which tracks the economic impact of U.S. tariff policy. And while President Donald Trump heralded the trade deal that he put together during his first term last week, he had a little bit of a different take on it when asked what's going to happen with the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement.
Go ahead. Mr. President, July 1st is coming fast. How confident are you that you'll be able to renew the USMCA, and what more do you expect from Canada at this point?
Well, I'm not looking to renew it. I don't, I made the deal, and the primary reason I made the deal is that NAFTA was the worst trade deal I've ever seen. Yeah. And I made it better, but I had the right to terminate. And, with NAFTA, we didn't have the right to terminate. I had to get these senators to approve that deal. That was a tough thing, Congressman, too. NAFTA had no termination. So, I've never said this before, but I'll tell you what my thinking was. NAFTA was a disaster for our country. The worst trade deal ever made, by far. They had typos in, okay? And they were supposed to correct them. And they never corrected them when they were signed. They knew there were typos. And there's a process for that. You state your claim and, you get a change. They had typos on percentages. Or maybe somebody wrote, and that was for years. They never ran, they had horrible, all against us. So it probably wasn't typos. NAFTA was the worst trade deal we ever had. USMCA did one thing that I loved. After 6 years, it comes up for renewal. I don't know that I'm going to renew it because, to be honest with you, the United States does much better. Hey, we don't need anything that Canada has. We don't need anything that Mexico has, but they need everything that we have. And they have to treat us better. With Mexico and Canada, we have trade deficits. We should have surpluses with them. We don't need their cars. We don't need their lumber. We don't need their energy. We don't need anything that they have. So the primary thing that I got, it was a much better deal than NAFTA. Much, much better. It was sort of a good deal. But it was a great deal for one reason. It gave the right to terminate.
Now, the president's first term, there was policy within the USMCA that united all kinds of people from across the political spectrum, including of Pennsylvania, where lawmakers on both sides of the aisle discussed the efforts to replace the North American Free Trade Agreement with USMCA. Although that agreement isn't set to expire until July of 36, regular review of the terms, and the countries continue negotiating every 6 years, as the first 6-year term ends at the beginning of July. Now, elected officials and analysts, they take a look at some of the possible impacts this agreement or the change, or could it be scrapped, could have. The Center Square contributor John Cole reports Pennsylvania Democratic U.S. Representative Brendan Boyle, who is a vocal critic of NAFTA, voted in favor of the USMCA. He said the USMCA improved many of the failures of NAFTA, but it did not do enough to address the myriad challenges faced by American workers. He went on to say now President Trump's chaotic trade policies are making things even worse. As a senior member of the Ways and Means Committee, I believe it is vital for Congress to use this opportunity to make improvements to the USMCA that benefit American workers, American consumers, and American manufacturers. Staying in Pennsylvania, Republican U.S. Representative Dan Mauser is a staunch ally of Trump and voted to pass the USMCA. In a statement to the Center Square, Mauser says the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement was negotiated during President Trump's first term to put Americans first and secured important protections for farmers and manufacturers. But as with many trade agreements, the U.S. representative said he has successfully negotiated. President Trump takes a thoughtful America First approach to free and fair trade policy. That means both America and our partners are treated fairly. Now, in Illinois, the Center Square reporter Sean Reed reporting in terms of energy, the USMCA provides that energy products like oil are not tariffed between the three countries, bolstering exports for the U.S. and providing reduced reliance on imports from other regions, according to documentation from the Office of the United States Trade Representative. Now, according to the Canadian government, Illinois, the fourth largest state for oil refining capacity, imports the vast majority of oil of its refineries from Canada, totaling $45 billion in crude oil imports per year. Patrick DeHaan, a fuel markets expert and analyst, told the Center Square that what potential impacts not renewing the agreement could mean for Illinois and the region. DeHaan saying that if the cost of Canadian crude goes up, or if there's a tariff on Canadian crude, that could eventually hit motorists simply because refineries in Illinois rely predominantly on Canada for oil. Now, DeHaan noted that the impact would more likely be felt down the road rather than immediately if Trump were to end the agreement and seek out tariffs on Canadian crude. We'll keep an eye on what happens again. USMCA set to be renewed next month with trade negotiations ongoing, and the president overseas in Europe as we continue to see the price of oil drop slightly after its announced negotiations between Iran and the U.S. advancing. This is The States